Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Dan Cardolicchio. Welcome to another segment of Destination Health Podcast, Finding Function in a Dysfunctional World, powered by Suburban Wellness Group. We are here, very special guest. I'm really excited about today's conversation. We have Wendy Jones coming on. Wendy, how are you today?
I am great, enjoying this California summer and just back from New Orleans for my first trip there. So doing lots of fun stuff this summer.
Did you do a lot of drinking in New Orleans?
More than I do on a regular basis.
I was just going to say.
I am not, I will be honest with you, I'm not a big drinker, but you get to New Orleans and everyone's like, oh, you got to go to the French Quarter, you got to have the food, you got to, and yeah. So
when in Rome type
yes,
of a thing.
Exactly.
So this is the part where I read your bio. I go over your bio. You can sit back. Usually guests, they're like, don't have to read it, but I think it's important. So you're the mother of four. Oh my goodness, the mother of not one, not two, but three, but four. Writer, founder of the Optimists Journal, which we're going to get into. Be better at volleyball, which we're going to get into, and a life coach. Passion for healing generational trauma and teaching the next generation to turn their struggles into strengths. She believes that if we can learn to cultivate self-awareness, very important, and develop an understanding on how to regulate our nervous system by connecting our mind, body, and spirit, we are on the path to living our best life. Welcome, Wendy. Tell me about this nervous system. What do you mean by that? How we can regulate our nervous system, and how does this connect body, mind, and spirit?
Well, I got on the path of understanding the nervous system a whole lot better when my fourth was born, and I knew from an early age that something was different about him than my first three. And come to find out, by about the time he was about 6 years old, he was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, which is no longer listed in the DSM, but he's a super high functioning, amazing, kind of mystical child that has just battled through a lot of struggle, and to become this 14-year-old boy that he is today, that is really, really incredible. But we went through all the things of, language delay and occupational therapy because of, certain motor regulation, and it all ties back to your nervous system. So understanding that he was living in a place of fight or flight, where his sympathetic nervous system is very activated, and then understanding that if I could help him find a calmer state, that life would become a little bit easier for him. And you never want to go in and say I wouldn't change him in any way, but you never want, it's hard to watch your kids struggle, right? And so I always wanted to do what I could to make his path stronger, straighter, somewhat easier for him. So that I started understanding more about the nervous system and how to help bring him down and find that parasympathetic state. And then I started realizing as an athlete that a lot of the things that I was doing for him are also the things that make a difference for elite level athletes, because we're not talking about silver bullet change. We're talking about the little incremental things that make just that little bit of difference, that either, a better performance or a better day for him.
Sure.
So, I have done a lot of things over the years, everything from diet to heavy metal detox to acupuncture and different modalities of healing. Breath work is huge, and just learning how to use your breath to bring your nervous system into a state where you are feeling more calm and therefore can respond to the world in a better fashion. So
yeah, I mean, it's very important. And all my listeners know that my son has ADHD, and same as yours, bright, beautiful young boy. He just can't sit in class, and he can't focus, although he's gotten a lot better, ever since he hit his teenage years. Your philosophy is to create calm and connection with every breath and movement specifically, how did you help your child with this?
Well, I discovered yoga about 6 years ago, and feeling what that did for my nervous system, I decided to get my teacher training and learn about what I was feeling
Hmm.
as, on my mat, and understanding how to connect that mind, body, and spirit. And as an athlete, I feel my body, and I'm very in touch with how my body feels and moves in,
Hmm.
in the world. And I wanted to help him. I saw that lack of connection in him, and I wanted to help him find that.
Hmm.
So, everything from yoga to, like I said, healing the gut microbiome, and, cleaning up your diet, and which is a challenge, with kids. They want to eat what they want to eat. And when he was really young, we did a diet, and it actually did make a big impact, like
Hmm.
removing the gluten and the dairy and the soy and all of those things.
Hmm.
Um, and it definitely made a difference. But like I've said with him, everything, it's just a small incremental change. There's no
Right.
silver bullet, right? And today he really presents a lot more as ADHD. So I can
Hmm.
recognize your son's struggle. It's really hard to learn when they can't down
Hmm.
regulate. And so we've just, you try to meet them where they are, and
Hmm.
not force things. I've never been able to force anything, but I try to lead by example. And
Right.
probably the best thing I've done is show them, like, exercise matters, those endorphins, how you can use that in your life to become a better person.
Hmm.
That's, to me, it's so much more what we do and
Right.
not what we say.
It's important. And as parents, it is, I went through a struggle where, oh, there can't be anything, wrong with my son. I fought it and fought it. And I don't know if you had that experience. And at one point in time, I said, okay, you know what? I guess everybody has something, right? Everybody has something, right? Everybody needs, like I said, everybody has something, and you have to deal with it as time goes on. And I was, thinking about when I was younger, did I have ADHD? I was like, geez, I think I was, I went to a private school. So if you leaped out of your chair, it was a different time in the 60s and 70s. That's how old I am. If you did that, it was a little different the way that they dealt with it than they do today. But it's really, I had to overcome, and it was a situation where once I was able to overcome and I was able to deal with the situation better and deal with him better, if you will, it became easier, and I was more understanding. And the gut, I wrote down the gut and I circled it 1,000 times when you said that, Wendy. I mean, the gut is very important. I do a lot of gut testing in my office, stool analysis, blood work, and so forth, because that gut microbiome, if there's a dysbiosis, and what I mean by that, if it's off, right, and you got that bad bacteria that's more in your gut, it could create a lot of issues, right?
Yeah, they call it what do they call it, what, our second brain, or our, like,
It
there is a lot of
Right.
research out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of research. It has an immune system. It's called the second brain. The condition is called intestinal permeability, or is it called leaky gut? It's kind of all tied into. It's kind of all tied into one. So where is he now? What's going on?
Well,
How?
he has a pretty incredible story, because
Tell us.
he's very drawn to the water.
Mm-hmm.
And when he was 2, he almost drowned in our
Ooh.
backyard pool. And that's a tragic story into itself. It's also a miraculous story, because he survived. I had to pull him out of the pool and do CPR on him until the firemen arrived. And he spent one night in the hospital, and the nurses would come in and said, we never get a near drowning that comes to the regular floor, that's not in intensive care, that doesn't stay,
Mm-hmm.
days on end and have like a lot more complications later in life. And
Mm-hmm.
he really, to me, it was very miraculous the way that he came through it. And he's always been drawn to the water, and it doesn't scare him. So in future years, he decided he wanted to learn how to surf, and he started surfing. And the summer, and through the winter and then through the summer, he became a pretty good surfer. So this was when he was about 10. He's 14 now. And we went back to school in the fall, and with his IEP, and we sat down in the circle with all these amazing practitioners and teachers that really have his best interests at heart. It's always just warms my heart when you see a team like that. We are very fortunate in the school district we're in Hermosa Beach. But the occupational therapist said, I don't know what you did this summer, but he doesn't need me anymore. And the only thing that had changed was that he learned how to surf, started paddling out, and for all the years we had spent teaching him trying to teach him how to cross midline, paddling out did something to regulate his system and organize his movement. And she said, he doesn't need me this year.
Wow.
And
that is amazing. You know what, you find that one or two things, like you said, you can make those small distinctions, and sometimes they could be really big, right? And so whatever that was for him, water, or a combination of the water, the movement, him being in a happy place, it really resonated. It resonated with him. And, individuals, and if you don't know what ADHD is, my son has mixed mild, and it's something where they just can't sit. They can't sit. They have to be moving all the time. And, my son says, Dad, I just can't sit down in school. I'm like, buddy, you got to sit down in school. You can't just get up. But it is very difficult for them. So you tried some dietary measures. You took out gluten, because gluten could cause a leaky gut, intestinal permeability. What else did you do when it came to the nutritional interventions that helped out?
Sugar is the obvious one. I mean, he's very sensitive to sugar, as we all are. I mean, it's a drug, right? And they have us hooked. Right. So sugar's a big one. And he also knows, which is interesting, he's not on any medications. But he knows that caffeine helps him focus. So he will say to me, Mom, can I just have this much of a Dr. Pepper or a Monster energy drink or something? He's like, I don't need the whole thing. But at one point I was taking him to a volleyball camp, and he said, can we please just stop and I'll only have half. And he's like, I want it to get through the day. So somehow he got to the point where he realized that caffeine, and then I did some research, right? And there's a lot of caffeine in ADHD drugs. So there's something in that caffeine that he is drawn to, which I have found very interesting, because to me, caffeine amps us up, but for him, and I from what I understand with a lot of ADHD, it helps regulate.
It helps regulate. It does ramp it, but then it starts bringing them down after a period of time, and so they do feel, calmer, if you will, and it's very difficult. And like I said, Wendy, I remember in high school just sitting in classes and just looking at the clock, and I could, there was just so much. You just wanted to jump up, and I say it, and I'll admit it. I'll say that he probably got it from me. I like to blame other people. No. But, it's something that is very difficult, to deal with, but once they get calm, boy, do they shine brightly, right? Tell us about that with your
absolutely.
Your son.
And
tell us about that.
That is something that I've realized, and I've seen it in my other kids too, is when they, it's how I became really interested in the concept of flow, and how do we find that optimal zone of activation where we can, function at our highest potential, and finding that flow in our life, and whether it's in sports or in school or in your relationships. And I felt it with my kids, like when you're really in a conversation and you're vibing, and they understand, you're locked in, and they're getting what you're saying. And
right.
And so I realized, it brings me back to the nervous system and just finding that calm point. And I know that about myself now, which is something I wish I would have known at a younger age. And to know that I'm at my best when I'm in that calm. And that's why I say in my philosophy, to find calm and connection, those are my two like really powerful, the ways I feel the most powerful in the world. And when I have that calm and I feel really connected to the people
Right.
around me. And that's what I want for him. And
calm is
it
very
escapes
important.
him.
Calm
Yeah.
is very important. It doesn't mean that you're not intense, doesn't mean you're not motivated, doesn't mean that you're not inspired, doesn't mean that you're not captivated by something. However, that calm, especially when you get older, when you're in that calm state, you can think clearer. So when you have to overcome, when you have to be resilient, when you're in that calm state, you see the possibilities. You see many different possibilities as opposed to, when I was younger in business, it was just, pedal to the metal all the time, because that's just the way it was with me, and you made mistakes, and, maybe you learned, maybe you didn't learn so much because you were younger and you didn't know what was going on. But, if you made a mistake, you made another 10 decisions to make up, hopefully, for that mistake. Because if you made a couple more, then you had to make another 10 decisions, right, in order to do
Yeah.
it. But having that calm is extremely important, and reaching that calm, whether it's through breath work, meditation, exercise, whatever that is, you just see the possibilities. What are your thoughts about seeing the possibilities when you're calm?
It so much comes down to presence for me. So when you're calm, you're present. And I'm not a big believer in multitasking, because I think you miss those opportunities of seeing what's available to you.
Mhm.
And not working from a state of overwhelm.
Right.
You'll always miss, and you'll never get the most out of other people if you are not in that state of calm. So it comes down to leading yourself, but then it's also like, as a parent or a coach, or a business owner with employees, if you're that guy running around with a million ideas but you can't seize the opportunity in any one of them, you're not leading by example, which is something that's really important to me.
Totally understand and totally agree. As I said, in my younger days, and I'm this entrepreneurial type, you got a million things going on. I still haven't conquered the multitasking yet, Wendy.
It's hard.
I'm a multitasker. I got rehab here, I got nutrition here, I got this, I got the podcast going on. I guess that's when you have ADHD. You kind of focus. Once you learn how to focus on a lot of different things, that can happen, right?
Which is really cool. And if you can execute, if you can drill down and execute, which clearly you're doing that, so you're not missing. I think it becomes an Achilles heel when we can't execute to bring what we know into full doing, or to see an idea materialize into a full plan that the world gets to see, right? Because with that entrepreneurial spirit, we all know we have a million ideas, right? But how do you find that place where we get to, get organized and drill all the way down? And that's something I've struggled with, and have tried to prove to myself that I do in fact follow through and get things done. So
it's not easy, Wendy. I woke up today at 4:30, and I've been having this idea that I've been formulating for a class, and I think that I finally have it honed down. I woke up at 4:00, and from 4 to 5:30, I had pen to paper. I'm old fashioned. I like to put pen to paper. I don't type.
Yeah, there's some brain science behind that. That's good.
And I'm writing pen to paper. And I think it was born out of a book that I'm reading again right now, Shoe Dog, the story about Phil Knight, which is an incredible story on how he had this idea of Nike, and so forth and so on. And, you know, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you know, read this book. It gives me calm, by the way. That's why I'm mentioning this.
Really? I'll have to
Gives
check
me
that
calm.
out.
It's a great book. And I started it last night, and he was talking about his idea and how he had to borrow money from his dad, and his dad just paid for him going to Stanford for his MBA. He's going to say no. But then his father said yes. And this was the genesis, the birth of Nike. And it just brings me calm, because, you know, to hear other people's stories, and we're going to talk about stories. And I was on the podcast last night, and let's just get into it. Okay. Why are stories important? Because I've heard you say this before, and I like stories. I like to hear stories. You know, we were talking, I had a coach on last night, football coach, and, you know, NCAA, and he was saying what's missing today is stories, telling stories, you know, and he used to tell stories to his team, motivational stories. It could be any historical figure, sports figure, anybody who's overcome, who was resilient. And in my life, it was Sunday, being Italian American, you know, after macaroni around 2:00. And, you know, the stories came out, you know, and we would all sit there on the living room floor, cousins and sisters and neighbors, and stories. And you heard those stories, and they were kind of motivating. Why are stories important?
Well, I think stories, they provide us with such an emotional imprint, you know, and I think that they're anecdotal. We can grab something from them and apply them to our own life. And that whole concept of like the hero's journey is out there for everybody, but it's being told in 100 different ways or 1,000,000 different ways. And, you know, I always say our stories aren't meant to be compared. They're meant to just make our experience richer.
Right.
And, you know, I've talked to some people. My blog has attracted a couple of interviews that I've done where I sit there and go, gosh, like my story doesn't even, my narrative used to be like, my story doesn't even come close to comparing to yours. And I'd be so fascinated with whatever story of resilience I was hearing. And then often that person will speak back to you and say, no, the sharing of these stories is important. They're as interested in hearing my story as I am in hearing theirs.
Right.
So I think it makes us better listeners. I think we can learn so much from the way other people handle things.
Oh, I agree.
But it's that emotional imprint that a story gives you.
It does. I have an emotional imprint when it comes to stories, because I grew up in an immigrant family. So they had to be resilient. They had to overcome, you know, abject poverty, the whole 9 yards. And, you know, those stories, you know, that we heard coming here to America, you know, and the love of the country, the love of this country. I have a love of this country. And what was that made them a very special generation? And they did it with a smile on their face. I'm not saying that they weren't upset, and I'm not saying that there wasn't some anxiety, depression, or whatever the case may be that was associated. But those stories, you know, if I see something on TV, you know, I really don't watch TV too much, but if there's a story and there's something like that, I can go to that, and that'll be the most fascinating movie to me for a generation,
sure.
You know, for a decade. You know, I think that's missing today. Now, we were talking about that. I think that's missing today. Hearing stories and telling stories. I think it's missing. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I think that people's attention spans have gotten so much shorter with the advent of social media and video. And, you know, we want to see something that's like bright and shiny and colorful and popping right in our face versus, I mean, and we want it in a 30-second soundbite. So how do you get
it doesn't happen that
context?
way, right?
It doesn't, right? And I will
agree,
say, I don't watch TV much either, but you know, during quarantine, the only thing that I really sunk into were stories. I'm a big, you know, documentaries or 30 for 30s. Oh my gosh, like my favorite, because it's those stories, and I love sports. So 30 for 30s and watching The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan story, and just understanding like the humanity that comes behind the things that we all know, like, okay, this guy's a superstar, Jordan's a superstar, you're Andre Agassi, like I have all these people, but I want to know the story behind the story. And that's what I love about those 30 for 30s or productions like that.
Well, I've been known to get to the story behind the story in my podcast. So Wendy, what's your story? What did you go through? What did you have to overcome? What did you have to be resilient with?
You know, I had a very blessed childhood, and my kids have gone through a lot harder things because I went through a divorce about 5 years ago. And that was truly between being very scared as a parent, being very scared as a parent when Matthew was a baby and not knowing what was going on with him and how parenting him was going to look different than
the others,
what I had already done. That was a big realization of, okay, what are you made of, right? And I will say that when he fell in the pool, I think we have these moments in our lives where we don't know how we're going to react until we're hit with it.
Right.
And the calm that came over me when I needed to respond was, it was very confidence building in a way. As terrible as of an event, and I would never wish that on anyone, and I'm so blessed and lucky that he is still here with us. Something I took from that was, oh wow, you really do, you have it in you to handle something difficult and
overcoming adversity.
Exactly. And so that was the first thing probably that I realized, okay, you do have a response in you that is strong and vibrant and will respond in a way that can help people. And then going through a divorce, which is again something I would never wish on anybody, but
how did that affect you? How did that affect you and your children, the divorce?
Oh, well, it's the hardest thing to watch your children go through. I mean, as much as you're hurting, watching your kids hurt is a million times worse. And for me, it was shutting a lot of the way things look versus the way things feel, and how important it is, like, for things to feel right rather than the way they look to the world. And I think we attach so much shame to these stories of, divorce or how other people see us, that you can get lost in that stuff. But then when I started to feel the growth, like I'm always amazed by the post-traumatic growth that comes out of things like this, and the health that I feel today. I can't imagine not being the person I am, even though I wish I wouldn't have. You don't wish.
You don't want to go through it. However.
Yeah. And I've become so much more self-aware, so much more.
In what way are you self-aware?
Well, I mean, that's basically where the Optimist Journal started, because when I woke up, I thought, and said, oh my gosh, I'm getting a divorce. I wondered, like, how did I get to this place? And I wished that generations back in my family had written some things down. Like, I wanted a story of where did I come from? What are the, I started looking at generational trauma and the way that and how it impacts relationships, and saw some things stories that I had heard in my family, alcoholism and things that had existed in past generations that really affected the way that we related to each other. And codependency and people pleasing and trying to find your worth in somebody else, versus knowing that we are all meant to create our own best lives and then connect with each other, right? Instead of letting somebody else define that path for you. And when I started realizing that I was a major people pleaser, and watching
did that come from somebody who was an alcoholic in your
yes, back in past generations of my family. So it would be my paternal grandfather. And I never knew that growing up because it was hidden. And I think in so many generations past, they kept a stiff upper, people kept a stiff upper lip, and we didn't talk about these things.
Right,
And I
sure.
think, right. And there is a strength that I know that the greatest generation carried, and they came through the Depression and World War II. The amount of strength that it took to come through those things, I will never know, because I didn't live in those generations.
Right.
But I do think that the transparency that, and I'm a big Brene Brown fan, and that concept of sharing your story and being vulnerable is a whole different kind of strength. And that's what I started to discover when I started to write. I've always been a journaler. And when I started to write my blog, just to help me process my divorce, and I thought, well, if I can't find a story from my past, at least I can start to write one, so that my kids want to know someday what their mom was thinking. They'll have that.
Right.
And so, I started writing, and as I started to write, it really became a healing process, where the more I put out there, and people say, gosh, you're really open. And I said, yeah, but people come and say, I felt these same things. Me too. Rather than feeling like someone's pointing a finger at you, the more real you are, you give other people that permission to feel comfortable to share their stories. And then I feel like the world's become such a combative place. And I do think that when we tell our stories, we understand each other on a level that doesn't feel so, it has to be one way or the other. We can see the duality and the shades of gray, rather than like, no, I think, divorce is wrong. And I think, or whether it's politics, like that combative nature falls away when we tell our stories.
Yeah, the hero's journey is very important. We all have one. And if you're an entrepreneur, talking about your hero's journey is extremely important. Were you going to say the word gritty at one point?
Yeah.
Go back to that. Go back to gritty. What is that? What does that mean to you?
Oh, it's that place where you didn't even know you had that level of digging deep. And until you're faced with something that really makes you go, what am I made of? That's when I truly realized that I am a real optimist, and I have the work ethic to back up being an optimist, because I am not a believer in blind optimism. And that grit is that work ethic that's behind the optimism, that you have that energy to make things, to help things work out.
Right. Talk about optimism. People think that optimism is Pollyanna at times. You hear optimistic people, you hear about pessimistic people, you hear about realistic people. I'm a realist, I'm a pessimist,
yes.
I'm an optimist.
Yeah.
Right? You hear about that. For me, optimism doesn't mean you're Pollyanna. Again, you see the possibilities of solutions. You use your grit. You can overcome this adversity. You're resilient when you're optimistic and you're looking for positive solutions. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think a real optimist always has a game plan,
Tell me about a game plan. What does that mean?
It's aligning your vision and your values. If you really, it's a journey of self-awareness, where if you have a place you want to get, or how a way that you want your life to look, you have to know what your values are, and then what is that game plan? What is that vision that if you want to be a healthy person, what does that look like? Does that, you value your sleep, you break it down into small little categories that seem very simple, but really it's you have to have that game plan, that baseline game plan, or things start to fall apart. Right. And that's so much of what you look at in your practice, that the theory of longevity is just, you have to have those building blocks of health.
Right.
So
what's your vision? What are your vision? What's your values, you personally, and how did that help you get through the divorce and anything that you've gone through in life?
Yeah, I mean, at the heart of everything, I'm an optimist, which is where, well, first and foremost, I've never had a day where I thought I can't get up and I can't do this. And I'm a connector. I love to feel that connection with people and know their story. And there's not very many places I go. I believe in eye contact and, you know, good morning and how are you? And I think that's a lost art, especially I live in Southern California, and it's something that I miss a lot from growing up, like in the Central Valley of California, because it changes a lot. The more people you have around you, it's almost easier to overlook them, you know,
sure.
because you get overwhelmed. And so I'm a big believer in slowing down and taking the time to listen. Listening is a skill that I think is so overlooked, and I love to hear people's stories. So I think one of my values is just being a really good listener to people who have a story to tell.
Yeah.
And then that inspires me to go out and do the same thing and live, you know, what my best life is. And it really has come down to like being a great connector and wanting people to understand each other better.
Right. Tell me about the journal, the Optimist Journal. What was the birth? What is it about?
Yeah.
And what are you trying to do with this?
I think at its core, I'm trying to provide generational wisdom, and I think that the wisdom that can be shared between generations is it's just gold, and I think if the more we can have out there. So I was just sitting on my patio one day going, oh, my life really felt like it was falling apart, and this was right before my
Divorce.
ex moved out. Yeah. And I just started writing, and after I wrote that first blog, and I was so scared to post it. And because I never wanted people to think that I was looking for attention. That's definitely something I've had to get over in putting my story out there. But it was born that day, and I just Googled Optimist Journal. I'm like, okay, that's what it's called, because there's not a URL, like it hasn't been used yet. And that was, you know, it just resonated with me. And it became an exercise in discipline. It became an exercise in creativity. And I really didn't know what I was going to do with it. It was an exercise in putting myself out there. And I had been a very quiet person, but that self-discovery and that self-awareness that came out of writing, and I'm not a marketer. Like, that's the thing. I love the journey it has sent me on, because I don't think it's even really out there too far. And I'm now just getting to the point where I'm starting to learn about SEO and really getting my story out there, because I don't market myself. I just really enjoy writing that much and synthesizing my life in words. So it's, you know, but what I do know, and why I know I'm on my right path, is that even without marketing, I've attracted some really interesting interviews. And I think you know how this works. You know, you're in your zone when all of a sudden someone reaches out to you. I interviewed David Smith, who is a gold medal rower from London Olympics that was diagnosed with cancer. And when they went in to take the tumors off of his spine, the surgeon made a mistake, and he woke up paralyzed on one side of his body. So his story of resilience, and that's one of the ones where I'm like, I can't even imagine the mental and spiritual fortitude that this guy has. I just get to sit and listen. And if my blog has he said, oh, I love reading your words and they help me. And that blows me away, because to me, his story is something that I can't, but then his story gives me strength. Right. So it's a mutual exchange. So that's been like one of my favorite things that's come from writing, is just that connection that you find with other people.
Absolutely. 100%. I fully agree with that. You know, I keep going back in my mind. I keep going back to your children. From all of this that's going on, what are 3 life lessons that you try to teach your children because of all of this?
I think the first is, and it's a hard one, is just be real. You know, don't work on making something look a certain way. get to know yourself and have the confidence to be that person,
Right.
because then
Sure.
you attract the right relationships and the right, you know, stories and the right schools, and you find yourself in environments where you can thrive. And if
Right.
you're working, you work against that when you are trying to be what someone else wants you to be. And I think that's a big lesson as a parent, because it's not our job to create our children, right?
Correct.
And I think a lot of parents get down that road. I will come back to 2 more goals, but I do think a lot of parents will say, oh, I want my kid to be a doctor or a volleyball player, and that's, you know, it's our job to teach them the value system and then let them discover their passions, you know.
Let them
and
discover. I
that's,
agree.
yeah. So another thing that I am really, I mean, teaching them how to connect. And that's what I've learned with Matthew, is even when it's a challenge, teaching them how to connect with other people and be supportive of other people, and not just be in their own head or what's best for me, but to be
Right.
like, you know, a good teammate. And I think, you know, something they learn in sports. One of my kids is in theater, but just learning how to support other people is so important. And I think that's something that you have to do by modeling. So
Absolutely.
not just telling them that.
Absolutely.
And I think also just the third thing I would say is just teaching them to dig deep, like that you always have more in you than you think. And then if you don't test that, you'll never know. So.
And that's where the juice comes in, is when you test it, right?
Yeah.
I see you smiling.
Right.
I see you smiling over there. That's where you test it. That's where you put yourself into a situation where you need to be tested. You're going to test your mettle. You're going to test who you are. Because I was brought up saying, when it was in every, you know, parents, grandparents, they had said, no matter how good or how bad it is, you still need to keep moving forward, type of a situation, you know, and you can do anything you want as long as you put this to good use and you make those decisions. And I think that is an issue and a problem. I see it in nieces and nephews. Boy, are they going to kill me for mentioning them. Seeing them next month, boy, are they going to get really upset, Wendy. But hey, you know what? I say to my nieces and nephews, I said, you got to use something right here. It's called your prefrontal cortex. It's your executive decision-making processes. And I say to them that you need to make sure you know how to use this in life, because if you don't know how to use it in life, it becomes a problem. And I have one niece who I love very dearly. She went through a difficult time, and she's finally on track, I think. And she'll call me up and we have these great conversations, and I tell her stories. And she listens and she researches and she calls me back and she says, you're right. I said, well, I'm old. You see all this hair? You see all this gray? I mean, there's only one reason why there's gray on there. I've been tested a lot, I say to her. And, using those thought processes is important, because I think that kids today, they don't know how to use that prefrontal cortex. The decision-making muscle is flabby. What are your thoughts on that?
I think there's 2 things that come to mind on that for me. The first one is I think it's part of the reason I'm so passionate about healing trauma, is that if we are in a traumatized state, we can't use our executive functioning prefrontal cortex as well. We're stuck in that limbic brain that's just trying to keep us alive. And so creating an environment where kids feel safe and loved will then allow them to find that place where they can start to make decisions for themselves and use that executive functioning. And that's definitely something that, you know, I think the world today, especially where I live and when you're raising kids who,
I think my partner just popped his head in for a cold pack.
Did. Hello.
There you go. Hi, say hi, Dr. Goldman. I thought that was on your end. Then I'm looking at him and saying, no, I know that guy.
That was on yours. So I do think that you have to, kids don't need a whole bunch of choices, and they don't need a lot of fancy stuff, but they do need to feel safe and loved. And then that allows them to start making those types of decisions for themselves and put them on the right path. Gosh, there was a second thing that was coming to me on this. What was it? Darn it.
You were talking about healing generational trauma.
Yes. And oh gosh, we were talking about healing generational trauma and decision making. I think, going to social media and caring so much about what other people think that oftentimes we are not making decisions.
Right. Everybody else is making decisions.
Right. You want to be like everybody else. And I've always told my kids it's cool to be different. Like, I've never had that desire for my kid to be the most popular kid in school, and not to say like you want them to have friends, but don't follow the crowd.
The moniker,
don't have to follow the crowd.
The moniker of being Mr. or Miss Popular sometimes isn't what it's knocked up to be, and it's different. I agree. You have to be who you are. Social media today is like the TV ads back in the 80s during the supermodel generation, where you had to think a certain way. Well, that's what marketing sometimes is all about. If you go back into the 50s and 60s, I wasn't brought in the 50s, it was the 60s. That was a long time ago when that was like, geez. So anyway, smoking cigarettes is cool, doing this is cool, and so forth and so on. So social media has taken over all of that at this point. So social media is kind of like the new TV ads right now. It's just a different venue. Individuals say to me, oh, social media, it's bad, it's bad, it's bad. Social media back in my day was watching TV or Marlboro Man, or something along those lines.
Yeah, and I'm a big believer in if social media is going to be out there, we might as well fill it with good things, which is how I aim to inspire with whatever I put out there. But it's also true to my experience. And I do believe in silver linings. So there's another one of my values is, we all go through hard things, but there's usually something pretty golden that you learn out of it.
That's right.
And that's what I write about. So
our motto here on Destination Health is to motivate, is to educate, and to inspire. So it's all good. That's what we like to do. So listen, we got about 10 minutes left. See how fast it goes?
Yeah, it goes quick.
you're like, geez, it just started. And I think we have more to talk about. So we're going to have you come back on in 6 weeks.
I would love to.
Yeah, I think we're going to do a live the next time.
Oh, cool.
We're going to go live. I don't know, maybe Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook,
I
maybe
would
all
love
of
to
them.
do that. Yeah,
maybe
I
all
would
of them.
love to do that.
So,
and I'm so fascinated with what you do with longevity, because that's another thing. Like, when you go through hard things, you realize like, man, I'm just scratching the surface on my potential. So how am I going to take care of myself so that I can have another 50 years on this earth? I'm 46, but that's another thing. When I looked at your website, I'm fascinated with what you guys do. So,
thank you very much. You know what? Somebody had said to me the other day, you're 60 years old. I said, don't rush it. I said, another half a year before I hit 60. I said, go easy. Right? And I said, they asked me, they said, when are you going to kick back? Or, do this? I said, I don't know. I said, I haven't really thought about it. Last weekend we had a baseball game, fathers against the sons, and we won. And
nice.
We said, there's always one more game in us. And I was like, I don't know, the spirit to compete, to live, to have fun. I'm all about the mentoring and the teaching. So when the kids were making mistakes, we were out there teaching them. And we made mistakes too, and they were laughing at us. But we said, listen, we're going to beat you, because even though we made a mistake, we know how to come back. We've done it a million times. He said, I don't know. Last year, my son plays hockey. Last year we were in, I want to say Boston. And then there was a flag football game that broke out between the parents, the fathers, some of the mothers from our team and their team. I was quarterback. I loved being quarterback. And, And I don't know, Wendy. I mean, it was like, yeah, I could drill a 40-yarder still, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could go much more than that. I got a bad rotator cuff, but still the fun that happens. And I said, I don't know if I'm gonna slow down. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know. I
Well,
have
I think, I mean, clearly it sounds like, you know, no matter what level of sports you compete in, whether it's recreational or all the way up to like college or professional athletics, if you have that competitive spirit, it teaches us something. And that is really my favorite thing. And my whole idea behind Be Better at Volleyball is that sports, the greatest thing sports does for us is give us a journey to our own self-awareness. And I am obsessed with those stories and watching either young champions or older legends and how they can, what they've learned through playing, but also just, I mean, I'm a master swimmer. Like I go out on a pool deck and watch an 80-year-old swim a 500 free and go, oh my gosh, like I'm as inspired by that as watching
the backstroke.
Yeah, exactly. The Olympian that's swimming, you know, there's something so inspiring about sports and what we learn.
Right.
That I just, those are some of my
All right,
favorite
Wendy,
stories.
we're gonna have a race then. I used to be a lifeguard, so I don't know if I could beat you, but I don't know. It's game on. Challenge is on.
All right. Oh, I too love the water, just like
Okay,
like my son.
so I don't know. I mean, maybe you come to the Atlantic. It's colder,
Oh,
a little
yeah.
bit rougher.
You'd have me there probably.
You know, I don't know. I got to equalize this out. I am 60 almost, but I'm down. I'm down. All right. Well, we'll have to talk about that offline here. So, yeah,
Sounds
where does
good.
volleyball come into all of this? Where's volleyball come in?
I have always loved volleyball. I learned to play in 6th grade. I was a walk-on at Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, sprained my ankle, had someone come under the net, take me out, and promptly got cut from the team. And what I realized at that point was how much I still loved fitness and competing and the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so while that was devastating to me, and I've dreamt about it countless times in my life, like it was a very big blow, but I realized what it taught me was how much I love the game. And so, you know, as you're growing up, and then I had my kids, and I just, you put your kids in the things that you know. So then my kids started playing volleyball, and then we moved to Southern California where the coaching is incredible. So when we moved down there, they got a chance to rise in a way that I couldn't even believe. And my son ended up, my 19-year-old ended up on a club team that won 2 national championships.
Wow, exciting.
And he was, and that ride and watching the level of commitment that they had to put in to get to that. And then he ended up at Stanford. He's an outside hitter at Stanford. And, you know, then going through that this last year of him they lost the program, and then we had to battle back and get the sports reinstated. So all of those gut checks on how much you love your sport, and they've all both playing and watching my kids play. And my oldest daughter is at TCU playing beach volleyball. Watching them play and seeing them learn all these life lessons, that's what's made me love the sport so much. Yeah. And I still play. And so also going out on the court 2 or 3 days a week and meeting up with moms who, some of them are Olympians, some of them played on the FIVB. Right. I'm just learning from them and going, wow, I can still compete. And then also sharing the stories, right, with the people that are on the court. So
hey, listen, when I'm done playing, I yell if I win, and I like to win. Or if I don't know if I like to win or if I hate to lose. I don't know. Somebody asked me that question one day. I don't know. I haven't figured quite that out yet. But I always yell, "Old guys rule." Old guys really rule. Do
you have a T-shirt? Have you seen that brand?
Oh my goodness.
There's a brand called Old Guys Rule.
Get out of here.
Oh yeah.
I have to get one of them.
They sell it in the surf shops in Southern California.
Oh, we're gonna have to. I'm gonna have to get one of those T-shirts. I'm gonna have to send you some cash to send it over. Old guys rule.
Send me your address. I'll get you one.
Old guys rule. All right. So we're almost done here today.
Yeah,
Really
I know.
goes, it really goes
It
quick. So
does.
final thoughts, free reign, talk. What are your final thoughts?
Final thoughts are, I think it is so important for intergenerational communication, for us to teach each other through
Yep.
stories. For me, they come through sports. I'm learning to see them come through the stage where my daughter is doing her theatrical
Right.
amazing things that she does on the stage. But I think that wherever our passions lie are where we learn our best life lessons. So for us
Right.
to be our best self, we have to discover what our passion is and then turn that into a purpose, and off we go. And
Yeah,
if you
I
don't
love
ever
that.
find that, life is it's an emptier place.
Yeah.
So
I agree. I love that.
yeah.
Well, our time is done.
Well,
It went
thank you for
quick.
having me.
Thank you
Yeah,
for
it
being
did.
on. And we're going to have you come back on. We're going to do it live the next time because I think
All right.
we're just scratching the surface here.
Yeah, I would love to do it.
Yeah, we're just scratching the surface. So Wendy, thank you very much for being on. Where can people find you? Where can they find the Optimist Journal, your blogs and so forth? Where can they go?
So I have a new website coming out very soon. It's called BeBetterAtVolleyball.com. And they can find me on Instagram at Wendy Jones _the Optimist. Those are pretty much my two active places. My Optimist Journal blog is coming over to Be Better at Volleyball, and that website
We're
is
going to
going
have
to be
it. Yeah, we're going to have your we're going to have that in our show notes so that people can contact you. They can find out who you are, and they can take a look and help. You can help them. You can motivate.
Sounds
you can
great.
educate, and you can inspire. So thank you very much for being on today.
Thanks so much for having me. It was great to see you, and yeah, look forward to talking again.
Yeah, you like, you know, people come on and they're like, oh, you got a lot of gray hair. And I say, yes, I do. So anyway, I'm Dr. Dan. I have 100 offices. So just go to Instagram, Dan Carlicchio, DCMS, and go to Dan Carlicchio, DCMS through Facebook. You'll see the offices, the phone numbers, and the websites and all of that. So I want to thank you very much. It's been a great conversation. I've enjoyed this immensely. We're going to have you back on. Thank you for coming. We recommend you contact Wendy and you contact her now. So thank you, everybody, for being here today. Be the best versions of yourself. Until the next time, go get them. Take care.
Thank you. You too.